As we are telling you now, we're going to go to the meat of the matter now. We tell you, say, we are continuing our program over the start last year, and even though the year is so done, we have to catch up quick. As that we have to push in as much things as possible to soak in your brains. You understand? That you can understand certain things even wider and have a different and more conscious perspective. That when you're talking, you can talk with proper authority. You understand? This is a theological college of the cutting edge right here on IRFM Wednesdays in Ocherios. We want to help all the people them in England who listen to it like how they eat them breakfast. We love that. Don't know much about the Bible. Most Jamaican people have a Bible at their house. Most Jamaican people quote the Bible. Most Jamaican people don't read the Bible. But them all that tell us them believe in the Bible. We are say the Bible is a compilation of works by many different people over a different period of time. Based upon what them was going through, based upon them ways to try explain certain things that going through in them life. Now we come and take it and we read it and claim say is the authority, the book of authority for life. We not gonna give credence to that because we don't know say a whole heap of that book there mess up bad.
Hello, this is Ken Davis. When I was in the 6th grade, a building was going up across the street from my school. Like most 10 or 11-year-old boys, I preferred watching bulldozers in action and concrete being poured to whatever was being written on the blackboard. I spent a lot of 6th grade gazing out the window. I don't think I learned anything that year. The red brick structure I watched rising with such absorbed fascination was a church. Unlike the soaring Gothic cathedrals of Europe or the formidable stone church my family attended, this was not a typical church. It was being built in the shape of a mighty boat. Presumably it was Noah's Ark. Most of us have a mental picture of Noah's Ark, and we all think it looks like a cute tugboat with a little house on top. Except that Noah's Ark didn't look anything like that. You can look it up yourself. Right there in Genesis, you'll find God's little instruction book, a set of divine plans for building an ark. Unfortunately, like most directions that come with bicycles or appliances, these are a little sketchy, providing little more than the rough dimensions of 300 by 50 by 30 cubits, or roughly 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. God told Noah to add a roof and put in 3 decks. Beyond that, God's instructions came without a diagram, unless Noah threw away the blueprints when he finished. So we should count Noah putting this thing together in time to beat the rains as one of the first miracles. Many years after I gazed out that classroom window, I discovered that the original Hebrew word for ark literally meant box or chest in English. In other words, Noah's Ark actually looked like a big wooden crate, longer and wider than an American football field and taller than a 3-story building. So the architect who designed that church to look like the Titanic may have understood buttresses and load-bearing walls, but he didn't know his Bible. He wasn't alone. Millions of people around the world own a Bible, profess to read it, and follow its dictates. Many say they study it daily, but most of us have never looked at a Bible, despite insisting that it is important. According to one recent survey, 9 out of 10 Americans own a Bible, but half never read it. Why? For most folks, the Bible is hard to understand. It's confusing. It's contradictory. It's boring. In other words, the Bible perfectly fits Mark Twain's definition of a classic, a book which people praise and don't read. Not only do we praise the Bible, but we quote it daily in public and private. It permeates our language and laws. It is in our courts for administering oaths. Despite the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it is on the Capitol steps when America inaugurates a president. It is cited by politicians and preachers, playwrights and poets, peace lovers and provocateurs. As its phenomenal sales prove, the Bible holds a special place in nearly every country in the world. There are complete Bibles in more than 40 European languages, 125 Asian and Pacific Island languages, and Bible translations into more than 100 African languages, with another 500 African language versions of some portion of the Bible. At least 15 complete Native American Bibles have been produced. In English, there are more than 3,000 versions of the entire Bible or portions of the Bible. The King James Version, first produced in 1611, and the Revised Standard Version remain the most popular translations, but publishers thrive on introducing new versions and specialty Bibles every year. The Living Bible, one contemporary paraphrased version, has sold more than 40 million copies since 1971. Around the world, active Bible study classes attract millions of students. So whether we worship in some formal setting or not, it is clear that people of nearly every nation remain fascinated by the Bible and its rich treasury of stories and lessons. To many of them, it is still the greatest story ever told. For millions of Christians, the Old and New Testaments make up the good book. For Jews, there are no Old and New Testaments, only the collection of Hebrew scriptures that are equivalent to the Christian Old Testament. In spite of these differences, the common chord for Christian and Jews is strong. These books have been the source of inspiration, healing, spiritual guidance, and ethical rules for thousands of years. The Bible is clearly many things to many people. The problem is, most of us don't know much about the Bible. Raised in a secular, media-saturated world in which references to God and religion leave us in embarrassed silence, we have wide-ranging reasons for this ignorance. For some, it was simply being bored by the drone of Sunday school or Hebrew class. Others received their Bible basics from the great but factually flawed Hollywood epics like The Ten Commandments, The Greatest Story Ever Told, and The Robe. Even those who think they know the Bible are surprised when they learn that their facts are often half-truths, misinformation, or dimly remembered stories cleaned up for synagogue and Sunday school. Sure, most people have some recollection of Noah, Abraham, and Jesus, but they are less likely to know about the tales of rape, impaling, and ethnic cleansing routinely found in the Bible. These are timeless stories with timeless themes: justice and morality, vengeance and murder, sin and redemption. Raised in a traditional Protestant church with a full menu of Christmas pageants and confirmation classes, I thought I possessed a fairly solid biblical education. While attending a Lutheran college and later Jesuit Fordham University, I continued to study the literature and history of the Bible. But then, in writing an earlier book called Don't Know Much About Geography, I posed a few simple questions related to the Bible. Where was the Garden of Eden? What is the world's oldest city? Did Moses really cross the Red Sea? That's when I got some surprises. In researching the world's oldest city, for instance, I learned that Joshua's Jericho is one of the oldest of human settlements. It also lies on a major earthquake zone. Could that simple fact of geology have had anything to do with those famous walls tumbling down? Then I discovered that Moses and the tribes of Israel never crossed the Red Sea, but escaped from Pharaoh's chariots across the Sea of Reeds, an uncertain designation which might be one of several Egyptian lakes, or a marshy section of the Nile Delta. This mistranslation crept into the Greek version and was uncovered by modern scholars with access to old Hebrew manuscripts. To me, the fact that the Exodus, one of the key stories in the Bible, was garbled by a mistranslation was a striking revelation, and it set me to thinking, how many other glitches are there in the Bible? How many other little mistakes in translation have blurred our understanding of the real story? My questions about the Bible took a more troubling turn when I wrote Don't Know Much About the Civil War. I discovered that Christian abolitionists and defenders of slavery both turned to the Bible to support their positions. Slaveholders pointed to the existence of slavery in biblical times, as well as laws and biblical commands requiring slaves to be obedient to justify America's peculiar institution. Abolitionists cited Jewish laws for emancipating slaves and sheltering runaway slaves, New Testament verses that suggested freeing slaves, and Jesus' commandment to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How could the Bible be right for both of them? The moral quandary pitting slavery against abolition marked a turning point in American history. For the first time, doubt was cast on the Bible's authority. My own curiosity about these troubling questions of biblical authority and accuracy come at a time when new research and scholarship are challenging many accepted notions about the Bible. For instance, there have been startling discoveries drawn from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the ancient Hebrew Bible texts, unearthed 50 years ago in some caves in the desert near the Dead Sea. These scrolls, the oldest known versions of the Hebrew scriptures that make up the Old Testament, have added immensely to an understanding of Bible texts and life at the time Jesus lived. Even more dramatic and controversial are questions raised in the Gnostic Gospels, a book that explores a cache of 1,500-year-old Christian documents very much at odds with the traditional New Testament stories of Jesus. Discoveries such as these are prompting serious scholars to re-examine very fundamental questions. Who wrote the Bible? Did Jesus say everything we were taught he said? Did he say more? Don't Know Much About the Bible is aimed at answering these questions for an audience that still considers the Bible sacred and important, but just doesn't know what it says. Of course, these sorts of questions also challenge traditional notions about what the Bible says, and I suspect my approach will roil people who are possessive about the Bible. On balance, however, this is a program in which historical accuracy, cultural context, and removing confusion about archaic words and mistranslations are all given a place in understanding these ancient texts. I try not to interpret the Bible so much as explain what is actually in it. As a historian, I know that tampering with the Bible is a risky business. I'm sure that some people will not be happy with my work because it challenges conventional wisdom by asking questions. Many people have been taught not to question the Bible. They fear that if you pull one loose thread, the whole thing will unravel like a cheap suit. Ultimately, the Bible is a book of faith, not history, biology, biography, science, or even philosophy. The questions I pose may be an affront to people who still believe that the Bible is the unquestionable Word of God. But for centuries, scholars and thinkers, many of them devout believers, have been raising legitimate doubts about the Bible. People of faith shouldn't fear these inquiries. If my questions upset you, blame Adam and Eve. After all, that forbidden fruit was plucked from the tree of knowledge, and knowledge is what this is all about. Underlying the Don't Know Much About series is the notion that school doesn't end when we leave the classroom. I believe it is crucial for people to question the easy assumptions they grow up with about religion, history, or a Ford versus a Chevy. The world is a school, life about learning. In the words of poet William Butler Yeats, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. Beyond lighting a fire, Don't Know Much About the Bible has more ambitious goals. We live in fascinating but confounding times. Rarely has the world seemed so corrupt, yet rarely has there been such worldwide interest in religion and spirituality. Whether it is millennial curiosity or the weary rejection of modern life, many people are pondering their lives and searching for something. Call it family values, morality, virtue, perhaps even faith. For these searchers, Don't Know Much About the Bible sets out to offer some help in attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, in the words of Proverbs. An ambitious goal? Absolutely. In other words, for the modern spiritual journeyer, this program sets out to provide a roadmap through a Bible that remains morally instructive, vividly alive, and spiritually challenging. Can I bring you faith? Make you believe? I'm not even going to try. If that is what you find, amen. If you don't find faith in this program, however, I hope you will at least find wisdom.
What is the Bible?
Most people think of the Bible as a book, like a long and complicated novel with too many oddly named characters and not enough plot. Pick up a Bible. Hold it in your hand. No question about it, it's a book. But it's vastly more. The word Bible comes from the medieval Latin biblia, a singular word derived from the Greek biblos, meaning books. So, in the most literal sense, the Bible is not a single book, but an anthology, a collection of many small books. In an even broader sense, it's not just an anthology of shorter works, but an entire library. You might think of a library as a physical place, but it can also mean a collection of books. And the Bible is an extraordinary gathering of many books of law, wisdom, poetry, philosophy, and history, some of them 4,000 years old. How many books this portable library contains depends on which Bible you're clutching. The Bible of a Jew is different from the Bible of a Roman Catholic, which is different from the Bible of a Protestant. Written over the course of 1,000 years, primarily in ancient Hebrew, the Jewish Bible is the equivalent of Christianity's Old Testament. For Jews, there is no New Testament. Both the Jewish Bible and Christian Old Testament contain the same books, although arranged and numbered in a slightly different order. In Jewish traditions, their Bible is also called the Tanakh, an acronym of the Hebrew words Torah, for law or teaching, Nevi'im, for the prophets, and Ketuvim, for the writings. These are the three broad divisions into which the 39 books of Hebrew Scripture are organized. These 39 books lay out the law, traditions, and history of the Jewish people and their unique relationship with their God. Starting in the beginning, with the very creation of the heavens and earth, these 39 books follow the lives of the ancient founders of the Jewish faith, the Patriarchs and the Matriarchs, and recount the story of the people of ancient Israel in good times and bad. While many of us recall childhood stories of such Israelite heroes as Abraham, Moses, Joshua, and David, the true centerpiece of these books is the code of divine laws, primarily laid out in the first 5 books, or Torah, that both Jews and Christians believe was given by God to the prophet Moses more than 3,000 years ago. For Christians who worship the same one God of Judaism, this Old Testament is a significant part of their religion and traditions, but it is only part of the story, because their Bible also includes a second act, or sequel, which tells the story of Jesus, a man Christians believe was the Son of God. Its 27 additional books recount how most devout women established the Christian church just about 2,000 years. This quick literal answer question the Bible ain't an issue. Who would comment that the Bible is the divinely inspired word of God, given to humankind through God's prophets? In other words, God dictated these Bible books word for word to men in his divine stenography pool. Centuries of research into the Bible present a far more complicated picture. The Bible is the culmination of an extended process, covered with centuries of inky human fingerprints, of storytelling, writing, cutting and pasting, translating and interpreting. That process began about 4,000 years ago and involved many writers working at different times, a fact that may still come as a distinct surprise to a good many readers.
Are the Dead Sea Scrolls the original Bible?
In the spring of 1947, while the British still controlled Palestine, Mohammed Ed-Dib was tending goats in the arid rocky hills near the northern Dead Sea shore. The Dead Sea is actually a salty lake in the middle of a desert, the lowest point on the face of the earth, and one of the hottest and least inviting landscapes in the world. The fresh water flowing into it evaporates rapidly in the heat, leaving behind a thick mineral broth. Fish can't live in these waters, hence a Dead Sea. In the hills that surround the Dead Sea, the young goat herder dropped a stone into a cave and heard it hit something. Investigating further, he came across ancient clay pots filled with scrolls and scraps of old leather covered in mysterious writing. His accidental find was the beginning of one of the most momentous and controversial discoveries in history, that of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Muhammad's find launched a wider search of the surrounding area, generally called Qumran, approximately 10 miles south of Jericho, on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. After the initial discovery sent amateurs crawling all over these rocky hills, scurrying to find more scrolls, an orderly archaeological search of Qumran was eventually organized. Over the years, many more scrolls and remnants of scrolls were uncovered. 50 years after that first find, researchers are still trying to piece together all of the tiny bits and pieces of leather fragments preserved by the dry desert air. What is clear is that these ancient scrolls included some of the oldest known texts of the Hebrew Bible ever found. Written in both Hebrew and Aramaic, a Syrian language closely related to Hebrew, and the language spoken by Jesus, more than 200 biblical documents have been found. Some are almost complete, others are in fragments. The scrolls contain at least a portion of every book of the Hebrew Bible except the book of Esther. Sophisticated dating techniques have proven that some of these scrolls were written nearly 300 years before Jesus was born. Others came from Jesus' own lifetime, a turbulent period in ancient Palestine when Rome controlled a contentious, rebellious Jewish people. The Dead Sea Scrolls make two facts clear. By the time Jesus was born, an official list or canon of Hebrew books in the Bible had not yet been set. And while these old books are very similar to the Hebrew scriptures as they are known today, there were slightly different versions of some of these ancient Hebrew texts. While the scrolls from Qumran offer fascinating information about the Hebrew text of the Bible and life in first-century Palestine, they leave another big, tantalizing question unresolved.
Who wrote the Hebrew Bible of Old Testament?
Many readers of the Bible still possess the divine light bulb notion of the Bible's composition. In this scenario, a man was sitting in his tent in the Sinai desert when suddenly, in a glorious flash, the entire text of the scriptures started flowing onto parchment or papyrus. As the Gershwins put it so succinctly, it ain't necessarily so. The history of the Holy Scriptures that modern Jews and Christians study is a fantastic story in itself, a tale out of an Indiana Jones movie. It's still unfolding with each new archaeological dig and discovery of an ancient scroll. Yet while the depth of our knowledge grows, the answer to a basic and extraordinary question largely remains a mystery. Who wrote the Bible? In spite of tremendous strides in scholarship and research dedicated to this question, the fact remains, no one really knows. And we will probably never know, short of some archaeological find of earth-shaking significance. But it is safe to say that the King James Version, familiar to most English-speaking Christians, and all the other versions loading down the bookstore shelves, are only recent links near the end of a long chain of troubled, sometimes badly garbled, and often conflicting translations. These various translations over the centuries have shaped perceptions of the Bible and what people believe it says. It still comes as a surprise to some English speakers that the Bible was not written in English, or to German speakers that it was not written in German. But research into ancient manuscripts, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the discovery of other ancient libraries have provided many more clues about the people who did write the Bible. First, researchers have learned that some of what appears in the most ancient sections of the Bible, including some of the stories in Genesis, was probably borrowed from other more ancient civilizations, particularly those of Egypt and Babylon. Various aspects of the laws that God gives to Moses in Exodus are similar to Babylonian laws known as the Code of Hammurabi, which is a few centuries older than the Bible. The story of the infant Moses set afloat in a basket is similar to the Mesopotamian legend of an ancient king Naaman. In other words, the authors of the Bible, like writers before and since, were not above liberal borrowing, or what modern writers call fair use. The beginning of the actual process of writing down what Jews call the Tanakh and what Christians call the Old Testament, dates back more than 3,000 years to approximately 1000 BCE. BCE, or before the Common Era, replaces BC, before Christ, in the dating system scholars now prefer. The actual process of writing down the scriptures followed an oral tradition that goes back at least another 1,000 years. The oldest of the Hebrew scriptures are the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. In Jewish tradition, these 5 are called the Torah, which means law or teaching. They are also known as both the 5 books of Moses and, in Greek, the Pentateuch, or 5 scrolls.
Didn't Moses write the Torah?
For centuries, Moses was accepted as the author of the 5 books of Torah. The Torah stated that Moses wrote down what he was told, so this was not simply a scholar's opinion, but an unquestioned matter of faith for both Jews and Christians. Some editions of the Bible still assert that Moses was the author of Genesis, and there are earnest believers who hold that as an article of faith. In the past, daring to question that fact took guts and more than a little chutzpah. When an 11th century scholar pointed out that a list of kings mentioned in the Torah lived long after Moses died, he was called Isaac the Blunderer, and his books were burned. Better his books burned than himself, Isaac undoubtedly mused. By the 17th century, as Europe entered the era of the Enlightenment, when rational thought and scientific observations were elevated over blind faith, other scholars began to question the authorship of Moses. A French priest who raised questions about Moses was arrested and forced to recant his views. In the grand tradition of the Roman Catholic Church, his writing was banned and burned. The official church resisted these questions about Moses for the same reason it always does: to ask questions raises doubts. But their power rested on unquestioning belief. Let some troublemakers start asking about Moses, and before you know it, they'll be asking why women can't be priests. What these generations of scholars all noted was that the books of Moses, in which the laws of God had been laid out, contained contradictions in time, place, and names that couldn't possibly belong in the time of Moses. Why were there duplicate versions of so many Bible stories? Versions that did not always agree. Why, for instance, does Genesis open with 2 different versions of the creation? Even more troubling, there were different names for God. If God had dictated these scriptures to Moses, why hadn't God used the same name all the time? And finally, how could Moses write, at the end of Deuteronomy, "Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command"? These and other troubling questions raised by the mystery of Moses just wouldn't go away. And as the Enlightenment and Protestant Reformation chipped away at the pervasive power of the Church of Rome, the questions were asked by more and more people. No longer could church leaders explain away the numerous differences in style or the contradictions and anachronisms contained in the Torah as the Word of God, take it or leave it. As generations of scholars pursued this mystery, it became clearer that Moses was not the book's author. They might be the books of Moses, but they were not the books by Moses. Equally important was the mounting evidence that the books attributed to Moses were composed at very different historical times. To many serious scholars, it seemed apparent that more than one author was at work. On many of these points, honest people still disagree. The difference is no one is being burned for heresy any longer.
If not Moses, then who?
Most scholars now agree that there were at least 4 or 5 main authors, or groups of authors, of the Hebrew Scriptures. They believe that they were composed over a long time, stretching from sometime around 1000 to 400 BCE. The idea that the Torah evolved from a combination of various sources is formally known as the documentary hypothesis. This thinking gained such weight that by 1943, even the Vatican, under Pope Pius XII, acknowledged it was time to solve these questions. Today, the idea is widely accepted and taught by leading religious schools, including the divinity schools at Harvard and Yale, the Union Theological Seminary, and both the Jewish Theological Seminary and the Hebrew Union College. The precise identity of who wrote these books is an unsolved and most likely an unsolvable mystery, barring an archaeological find of the most revolutionary sort. But the principal authors have been given names and are identified by 5 letters of the alphabet: J, E, D, P, and R. J is the oldest, most celebrated of these presumed authors. J is from the first letter of the German word Yahweh, the source of the word Jehovah, another mistranslation now written in English as Yahweh. The biblical writer, codenamed J, consistently calls the Israelite God Yahweh. J is the Hebrew Bible's best storyteller, more interesting, more humorous, and more human than the others. J's Yahweh interacts with man easily and directly. Close on J's heels is E, the Elohist, so called because this used the word Elohim for God. Although some scholars have placed E before or even contemporary with J, most think E came later, perhaps between 850 and 800 BCE. Most agree also that E is a much less colorful writer than J, and that E's contribution begins with the story of Abraham in Genesis. The third Old Testament author is known as the Deuteronomist, who most likely worked between 700 and 600 BCE and was responsible for large portions of the book of Deuteronomy. D is also thought to have shaped the major historical works of Hebrew scripture that describe the conquest of Canaan and the establishment of the kingdom of Israel. The texts credited to P, known as the priestly author, include some of the most familiar words in Western civilization, including "in the beginning," the creation account found in Genesis 1, and the first version of the Ten Commandments. P's contribution was probably written sometime between 550 and 500 BCE. Dry and detail-obsessed, P was especially interested in codifying and justifying all of the ritual laws developed by the early Jewish priesthood. P might as well have been called L because he is so concerned with the law, but he is also often as long-winded and tedious as a lawyer. In addition to these 4 writers, or groups of writers, there was probably another individual or group responsible for creating the Pentateuch and some of the other early books of Israelite history as they now stand. In some respects,
you are tuned to the Theological College of the University of the Cutting Edge, right here in Ocho Rios. Look here, this week in Rebel Salute. Why you know say Black History Month coming up, there's a series of activities going to take place. Just tune into the Cutting Edge and it's taking place. We're there with you right through. So we're going to go forward to the tape, you know. Big things are going on it, you know. Big things, if you listen carefully, big things.
Responsible for creating the Pentateuch and some of the other early books of Israelite history as they now stand. In some respects, this was the most extraordinary feat. R was the redactor, or editor, who took the 4 existing strands and spliced them together around 400 BCE. Like the others, R's identity is a mystery. No one even knows whether there was more than one redactor. The work of the redactor is fascinating because of the way so many different and even contradictory strands of scripture were woven together. But it also raises a beguiling question. Were there any parts that are edited out of the picture? That is a mystery that remains in the realm of speculation. As for the other 34 books of the Hebrew Bible, the prophets and the writings, evidence of authorship is either shaky or a complete mystery. Many of the books show the handiwork of writers working at different times and in different historical circumstances. But it is safe to say that David didn't write all, or even most, of the Song of David. Solomon didn't write Proverbs or the Song of, and Isaiah didn't write Isaiah. These books, again transmitted orally for generations, were not not finally set down in something like their present form at 400 BCE, long after Moses and David. Some were not considered Holy Scripture for many more years. It was only around 90 CE that the Jewish rabbis closed the book they considered the official list of their Bible. CE, or Common Era, is the historical dating system which scholars now prefer over AD, or Anno Domini.
Who were the children of Israel?
Why is there no evidence outside the Bible that such crucial personalities as Abraham or Moses existed? Why didn't the Israelites think to make sure that they kept track of which mountain was Mount Sinai of the Ten Commandments? These are bothersome questions for any thinking reader of the Bible, but they point to another underlying issue. Most of us have no sense of the historical background of the Israelites and little idea as to who the people of the Hebrew actually were. This brings us to a basic fact. It is nearly impossible to understand the writing and meaning of the Bible without understanding the history of the people who wrote it, the ancient Israelites. Who were these people? The first Jews. Located on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, the world of the Bible is a tiny area, but it was a natural bridge between three continents, Africa, Asia, Europe, as well as a natural beachhead for seafaring traders from the Mediterranean. And it was this geography that made the area such a collecting point for so many different groups who have had so much impact on history. Though small in area, this land the Bible called Canaan features an extraordinary diversity of climate and features. A gentle coastline slopes up to mountains and the vast deserts beyond. The Jordan River flows from the steep, snow-tipped mountains of Jordan into a beautiful freshwater lake, the Sea of Galilee, before plunging down to the Dead Sea. Into this such striking contrasts came waves of people, some as wanderers, some as traders, but many as invaders and conquerors. This was a blood-soaked piece of real estate, just as it continues to be today. Bracketing the land of Canaan were the two great superpowers of the ancient world. To the north and east was the land of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization that sprung up in the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. At the extreme other end of the land was Egypt, home of a civilization that lasted for thousands of years. Wedged into a tiny strip of land between the sea and desert, Canaan served as bridge, buffer, and battleground between these ancient lands, whose emperors vied for control of the area for centuries. The land called in the Bible gradually grew to include both rural and urban people. A true melting pot, it was a land of herders, farmers, and traders. It was also a land of many god religions, although one group of Canaanite gods was most widely worshipped. The supreme god, the creator, called El, a word that figures prominently in Genesis, as evidenced in such names as Israel and Bethel. El's son was the storm god Baal, another name that appears prominently throughout ancient Israel's violent history. And among Baal's consorts were Astarte and Asherah, mythical female goddesses who must have been very alluring to the children of Israel. The followers of Moses and their descendants kept getting into trouble with their Yahweh God because they continued to worship these fertility goddesses instead of Yahweh. Since worshiping Baal and his goddesses probably meant having sex, or watching priests have sex, it was presumably more appealing to the masses than a religion that involved killing small animals and didn't allow women in the temple. This oversexed Canaan was the little piece of land that the Israelites said they had been promised by their God. There is little historical or archaeological evidence to tell much about the people who came to be called Hebrews, a word possibly derived from an Egyptian word, Habiru, a derogatory term for outsiders, or Jews, derived from the later Roman name for the country, Judea. No one really knows when the children of Israel arrived in Canaan. No one really knows precisely where they came from, although the evidence points to beginnings in the Tigris-Euphrates area. At some point, they moved into Canaan, and sometime after 2000 BCE, some of them crossed into Egypt and remained there in the Nile Delta for a few hundred years. This group left Egypt, where they said they had been enslaved by an unnamed pharaoh, and moved into the wastelands of either the Sinai or Arabian desert for 40 years, under the direction of a charismatic leader named Moses, who said he spoke to God. Through Moses, the ancient promises that these people would one day possess Canaan were reconfirmed. By around 1200 BCE, through conquest or gradual migration, the Bible has it both ways, they eventually took control of the land from the Canaanites, whose religious and sexual practices were so abhorrent to them. It's difficult to say precisely what these Canaanites did that was so abominable, but it can be assumed they had sex in their temples and possibly didn't flinch at homosexuality, incest, bestiality, or human sacrifice. The first piece of historical evidence of the existence of the children of Israel is a stone plaque, or stela, from Egypt dated 1235 BCE. This stela, from the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah, mentions the complete destruction of the people of Israel. Merneptah's claim of a lopsided military victory, obviously inflated, is the first recorded reference to the people of Israel outside the Bible.
If the scriptures were written in Hebrew, where did all the Greek words come from?
Approximately 2,000 years of history pass within the Bible's pages. Great empires came and went around the ancient Near East. Along with those rising and falling empires and cultures, Hebrew and Aramaic fell into disuse, eventually replaced by Greek. And sometime around 250 BCE, when many Jews realized that they no longer understood the Hebrew of their ancient religion, someone decided to preserve those writings in a complete Greek translation of Hebrew scripture. This Greek translation was later called the Septuagint, meaning 70. According to the legend, 72 elders, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, did the translating. Each of these elders produced exactly the same translation in exactly 72 days. The number was rounded off to 70. Modern scholars dismiss the 72 identical translations as legend. In fact, the work was begun because the large Jewish in Egypt elsewhere in the Hellenized or Greek-speaking world needed a translation from Hebrew, which had fallen out of use during the diaspora or dispersion of Jews throughout the Mediterranean world. The Greek Septuagint became the most popular form of the Hebrew Bible. It was the unofficial scripture of the early Christians who read the Hebrew laws and prophets in Greek. Roman Catholic Bibles, such as the Jerusalem Bible, still show this influence. Some of the books in the Septuagint were not considered holy by the Jewish rabbis, who established the official canon of their Bible. When the Christian church split during the Protestant Reformation, the Protestants accepted the Jewish canon. That's why the Protestant Old Testament is the same Hebrew Bible, except for the order and numbering of some books. However, Catholics consider the Septuagint holy, and Roman Catholic Bibles include 11 books that are not in the Hebrew or Protestant Old Testament. These books, called the Deuterocanonical books, are represented in modern Bibles in the Apocrypha. Apocrypha, not to be confused with apocalypse, is from Greek by way of Latin and means hidden. To further confuse this issue, other Christian sects, such as the Eastern Orthodox churches, recognize even more books as sacred. In other words, for nearly 2,000 years, humans have been deciding what should and shouldn't be read as the divine word of God. All of them claim to be inspired by God in making those judgments, but all don't agree. The next major step in the process that led to the Bible as it is known today came when Latin, the language of the Roman Empire, replaced Greek as the Western world's common language. Beginning in 382 CE, a priest named Jerome began the process of bringing both Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament into Latin. Working for 20 years in Bethlehem, the traditional birthplace of Jesus, Jerome went back to the original Hebrew Aramaic texts, instead of simply translating the Septuagint Greek into Latin. Jerome supervised the translation of a Latin Bible that was completed by 405 CE. His work resulted in the Versio Vulgata, or Common Translation, better known as the Vulgate Bible. To Jerome, Vulgata meant vulgar in the sense of commonly used, rather than the widespread modern meaning of vulgar. But this is a perfect example of how words change meaning, a significant factor in understanding the Bible. Many words simply do not mean in the modern world what they meant in Jerome's Latin 1,500 years ago. Among Jerome's decisions was to retain the use of the name Jesus, which was how the first century Greek writers of the New Testament had translated the Hebrew name Joshua. Of course, only priests and a few wealthy, educated individuals could read the Word of God. During this era, the scriptures were still copied by hand in the famed illuminated manuscripts of the so-called Dark Ages. Of course, few people could afford to own such a book, and few ever saw one. Fewer still could read it. The Latin Mass became the predominant form of worship in Europe, but most people had no idea what was being said in church. The advent of Gutenberg's printing press in 1450 meant the Bible could be mechanically produced, but even then, only about 200 copies of the Gutenberg Bible were produced, and it was still in Latin. But in the early years of the movement that came to be called the Protestant Reformation, begun in Germany in 1517 by Martin Luther, a few daring souls attempted to translate Holy Scripture from the Hebrew, Greek, and Latin into commonly used German and English. Like the mythical Prometheus, punished for bringing fire to mankind, some of these rebels would pay for their crimes. Some died for their belief that the Bible was for all the people to read. Every stand-up comedian, speaker, or preacher that the best way to get an audience's attention is to tell a good story. If the story is funny, that's even better. A little sin and sex? Better still. That's why writers from Homer, Aesop, and the other right through Shakespeare and up to modern Hollywood have always dressed up their mess with great stories. That's one reason why the Bible is still around. It's full of great stories. And not just the simplistic virtue tales many of us remember from Sunday school. The Hebrew prophets often cloaked their messages in stories. And Jesus certainly relied upon parables and short stories to teach. But nowhere is the truth of the Bible being a great story more evident than in its opening book. Here is an account of the beginning of human civilization and God's unique relationship with humanity, reduced to a series of fascinating narratives. This mini-series is filled with all the cliffhanging action and humor that we expect from television or the movies. The stories are poignant, funny, compelling, and not a little troubling. On one hand, there is faith, goodness in the face of evil, and obedience to God. But on the other hand, there is betrayal, trickery, thieving, incest, and murder. These aren't the simplistic, moralizing Sunday school of a bunch of goody-goodies who are well-behaved and did exactly what God told them to do. And what God told them to do wasn't always so nice in the first place. The Torah, by the opening words, or first significant word in the book, call it Bereshit, in the beginning. Readers who return to Genesis after an absence may be surprised to discover that it is a much different story from the one they may dimly recall from childhood. Genesis covers time from the beginning of the world through early human history and the rise of civilization to the establishment of God's relationships, matriarchs, and people of Israel, told through the compelling stories of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and their twin sons, Esau and Jacob's wives and family, the chief member of which was Joseph. It ends with the death of Joseph and the Israelite sojourn in Egypt, setting the stage for Exodus.
Why are there two creations in Genesis?
One of the most sudden and shocking surprises to readers who might be vaguely familiar with the biblical creation story but have never read the Bible is that there are actually two creations in Genesis, separate and unequal. Version 1 begins comfortably with the well-known, "In the beginning." Out of nothingness, and simply by speaking, God creates an orderly world and humanity. In this first creation, which begins in the first chapter of Genesis, it takes God 6 days to create the heavens and earth. Then come the animals, and finally, man and woman are created simultaneously, as apparent equals in God's image. After a hard week at the office, God decides to put his feet up and take a day off, instituting the first Sabbath. The second version of creation is set in the Garden of Eden. It makes no mention of the number of days God took to accomplish this heavy lifting, and the order of creation is different from the first account. In the second version, man is created before the trees and other animals. The other big difference in this second creation is that man is created first, and then woman is created out of man. Side by side, these are clearly two different stories bringing substantially different details. This is where the J versus P version of biblical events discussed earlier first comes into focus. The first of the creation stories is attributed to P, the priestly writer. God creates the heavens and the earth out of nothingness, a void. On 6 successive days, P describes the Creator neatly making the universe, setting up shop on earth, and finally getting around to making people. In the words of the King James Version, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." Clearly, in the first creation account, there is no differentiating between male and female. God creates both sexes at the same time, both in his image. Of course, this first creation account raises all sorts of troubling questions on its own, even without a competing version in the next chapter. Who is this us that God mentions when he says, "Let us make man in our image"? So far, the creation hasn't included anyone else. Is it the regal us? And if mankind is created in God's image, does that mean we look like God? And would that image be black or white? European, Chinese, or Eskimo? If man and woman are created together, both can't literally be made in God's image, can they? And if God says this creation is good, why does it go so bad? Of course, questions like these have puzzled philosophers and religious thinkers for centuries, filling libraries with discourses on the nature of God and creation. Certainly, those problems are vexing enough. But Genesis complicates matters, and the creation story is retold with significant changes. In this version, attributed to J, God creates earth and the heavens, and then makes Adam from the dust of the ground. He sets Adam down in Eden, where there are trees that are pleasing to the sight, as well as the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. After that, God makes the animals and birds to keep man company. Seeing that Adam is still lonely, God makes woman out of one of Adam's ribs. In this account, there is no mention of how many days this took, and when, or if, God rested. These stories were not entirely original. Both the first creation account, in which God speaks and the world is made, and the second creation account, starring Adam and Eve, share similarities to other creation myths of the ancient Near East. The myths of Mesopotamia, the two great civilizations that bracketed the land of the Israelites, also celebrated the concept of a divine word. In other words, the ancient Israelites drew upon commonly held beliefs about the creation, ancient folklore that came from the lands and people that had the most impact on the ancient Near East. That basic fact will be repeated often throughout Genesis. The difference was that in Genesis, it was shaped into an account of a special ship between the Israelite God and humanity that had no precedent. Nature gods, whose behavior was more human than divine, were transformed by the Israelites into a personal God with a very clear and rigid moral code. This God was going to make these people his, but they had to toe a very sharp line of good behavior, or else. Much of the Hebrew scriptures will tell the story of what happens when the children of Israel don't keep up their end of the promise.
Who was right, Genesis or Darwin?
How do you balance a belief that the world was created by divine pronouncement a mere 6,000 years ago with scientific observations that modern humans walked 100 years ago and a galaxy was born 13 billion years ago? This is the war between science and faith. It's not simply some drawing room argument or a nice academic debate over sherry in an ivory tower. The question of science versus faith has spilled into classrooms and courtrooms over such major controversies as cloning, Christian Science, and creationism. Until Charles Darwin rolled into 1959 with his notion of natural selection, most people accepted that God made the world in 6 days and then he rested. For nearly 4,000 years, many people accepted Genesis as a perfectly viable account of the world's beginnings. Then science turned into the skunk at the garden party. When Copernicus and Galileo suggested that the earth revolved around the sun, they were mocked, or worse. In 1616, Galileo was accused of heresy, placed under house arrest, and prohibited from further scientific inquiry. Then Darwin's Origin of Species proposed that man had evolved slowly, sharing common ancestry with the apes. Most of the religious world did not take kindly to this suggestion. It was one thing to discover that Galileo had been right about the solar system. It was another to accept that humankind was kissing cousin to the monkey. The challenge remains. More than a century after Darwin first proposed the ideas that formed the basis for modern evolutionary theory. Can science and religion coexist? Nowhere is that battle more clearly defined than in the question over the divine creation. As many creationists like to point out, evolution is just a theory. And that's true. In a purely scientific sense, all theories can only be disproven. But theories can also be supported by evidence. And the past 100 years have provided ample evidence to support and expand the scientific view, not only of human origins, but of the origin of the universe. Putting Genesis in a biology or genetics class, however, makes about as much sense as teaching the changing of water into wine, Jesus' first miracle, in a chemistry class. But that does not mean that scientific and religious theory cannot somehow be brought together. As science explores further and further past the known world, whether it means seeing 13 years into the universe's past, or using DNA strains to push humankind's origins back another million, science is ultimately left with more questions. The notion that the universe is all energy has forced scientists who deal in the astonishing world of quantum physics to look past their equations to a universal creative force. At the same time, to accept that the Bible is filled with poetry, allegory, teaching parables, and other stories doesn't alter the fundamental truth to be found in the Genesis accounts. As Pope John Paul II said when he gave support to Darwinian evolution, if the human body has its origin in living material which pre-exists it, the spiritual soul is immediately created by God. Of course, science can't speak of the creation or even existence of the soul. The soul can't be removed, weighed, and dissected as human organs can. Why not see the creation in Genesis as a magnificent metaphor for the Big Bang, an event that science acknowledges but does not yet fully understand? Viewing the opening words of Genesis as a poetic account of this cosmic instant of creation, when matter essentially burst out of energy, doesn't alter the essential truth of Genesis for those who believe it. Having made man out of the dust and brought him into existence with the breath of life, God places man in Eden, warning him not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, threatening death if he does. Then God creates the rest of the animals to keep him company. The man names these animals, but still doesn't have a proper partner. God then causes the man to sleep and removes one of his ribs and forms woman. The man and woman are naked in the garden, unashamedly enjoying sex. Along comes the serpent, and the woman is convinced to eat from the forbidden tree. The serpent promises her that she will be like God, or gods, depending on the translation. The woman agrees, then gives the fruit to the man, and he eats. Their eyes now open to their nakedness, feel shame, and sow fig leaves in cloths, and try to hide from God. Out for a stroll, God finds them hiding, and asks who told them they were naked. The man quickly establishes the human tradition of finger-pointing by saying, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, and I ate." God is not happy. It is the first of several biblical in which you will wonder if this man thing was such a good idea after all. But starting from scratch, God gets, then he gets even. The serpent is cursed to crawl on his belly, and there will be permanent hostility between snakes and people. The woman will suffer the pain of childbirth and be ruled by her husband. We know a man wrote that. Instead of invoking the death sentence promised earlier, God curses the man to a life of hard work. Then the first couple gets kicked out of the garden.
Were there really apples in Eden?
Apples are supposed to be good for you. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. And what's more wholesome in America than apple pie? So how come apples got such a bad name in Genesis? Truth is, there was no apple in Eden. Genesis doesn't even mention forbidden fruit. The Eden account mentions only the fruit of knowledge and the fruit of everlasting life. Some historians have suggested a number of likely suspects as the forbidden fruit, including apricots, pomegranates, or figs. A prime candidate since the leaves of the fig tree became the first unisex leisure wear. Fig trees also figure prominently in other spiritual tales, particularly that of the Buddha, who achieved enlightenment while sitting beneath a fig tree known as the Tree of Wisdom. This suggests that the fig may be more than just filling fruits. In other words, the image of Eve polishing up a nice red apple, fodder for great artists and political cartoonists throughout history, has no biblical basis. The apple wasn't connected to the Eden story until the European Middle Ages, when artists began to depict Eve with an apple, presumably as a way to give common people a familiar fruit. In eating from the tree, Adam and Eve acquire the capacity for rational and ethical judgments, one of the key ingredients in setting human beings apart from the rest of the animal world. If the first couple had obeyed God, it would have meant that humanity would have lived in peace, without wants, worry, or presumably violence. But what a boring paradise that might have been. A vegetarian paradise with no wants is like a life of eternal infancy, a paradise without science, art, and the sort of rational distinctions that have brought humanity to state. The biblical tale of the fall is similar to other legends that contrast humanity's sufferings with an earlier time of perfection, a lost paradise or golden age. The Greeks' Pandora, like Eve, is responsible for the misfortunes of mankind. She disobeyed the order not to open the box out of which all the troubles of the world flew. Like all such myths of a lost golden age, the biblical fall is an attempt to address problems of evil and human suffering, and a symbol of how humans yearned for a better, but possibly unattainable world. Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, the firstborn, was a farmer. Abel was the first shepherd. Both bring offerings to God, but God rejects Cain's offering of grain without explanation, preferring Abel's, which was the firstborn of his flock. Angry that God rejects his offering, Cain decides to take it out on Abel and kills his brother. God discovers this act when he asks Cain where is, and the famous "Am I my brother's keeper?" reply is given. God curses him by making him a wanderer, the original fugitive, and marks him with an unspecified sign. This so-called mark of Cain is actually a protective sign from God that will prevent anyone from murdering Cain, who heads off to the land of Nod, east of Eden. It is not precisely clear why God gives the murderer this mark of divine protection. Perhaps God wants to reserve judgment on Cain for himself. After Cain leaves, Adam and Eve give birth to a third son, Seth.
Where did Cain's wife come from?
So we have Adam, Eve, and their sons, Cain and Abel. The story of Cain and Abel introduces many of the themes that will recur throughout Genesis and the Hebrew Scriptures. Of course, it marks the first murder. But there is also the first appearance of sibling rivalry and the enmity between brothers played throughout Genesis. The two characters also symbolically represent the farmer, Cain, Abel. Tension between these groups was common throughout ancient times, so the story stands as a mythical explanation for the conflict between these two ancient callings, the true oldest professions. Cain goes off to the land of Nod, which means wandering, and finds an unnamed wife. Where did she come from? The scriptures contain no explanation for Cain's wife or the people Cain fears might murder him. One simplistic rationale, unsupported by the text, is that God kept creating more people after Adam and Eve. Is that Adam and Eve had more children, and they were all able to intermarry, as incest was not yet deemed out of bounds. This inconsistency is only one of many blows to the literal interpretation of the Bible. This is the chief argument for viewing the Genesis account as a mythical folktale tracing the primeval beginnings of humanity, steeped in the ancient folklore of the Near East. Once married, Cain begins a family, and his firstborn son is named Enoch. Cain also builds a city called Enoch. This is a typical Genesis combination of place and personal names. The notion that Cain builds a city also contradicts the curse that Cain would always be a wanderer. He was actually the founder of the first city. Maybe God issued a parole. Genesis doesn't say. At this point in the narrative, two genealogies trace the descendants of Cain and his younger brother Seth, born after Abel's death. The Seth list, the more important of the two in that it leads to Noah, also contains specific and fantastic ages for each ancestor. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made mankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I did, people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor of the Lord. Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 8. People have become very wicked, so God decides to clean the slate by sending a flood. Only Noah and his family, direct descendants of Adam, are good enough to save. So God orders Noah to build a boat, or an ark, from the Hebrew word for box.
Yeah, this is the Continent on RFM. We have a message, you know. Why you look Martimo Plano, you know? Yes. Can't take them only for accident we are going around Martimo, you know. Anyway, look here. Anyone who know love it, who used to live at Trenchtown, or maybe still live at Trenchtown, why you get in contact with Martimo Plano? I will give you this number. Anybody who know Lovey, yes, who know Plano, the number is 851-2674. 851-2674. Plano is urgently trying to get in contact with Lovey. This is the Cutting Edge on RFM. We're going through the pieces, as we say, very important CD, this one, very important.
Or chest. Noah is told only to take their 3 sons and their wives aboard, along with pairs of all animals and birds. This is where Ark's story gets a little confused, and it's clear that someone mingled the separate J and P accounts of the flood into a single narrative that is sometimes contradictory. One account calls for pairs of every animal on the earth. The other calls for 7 pairs of clean and unclean animals and 7 pairs of each species of birds. The flood comes not just from the rains, but up from below the earth in a kind of reverse creation. Water covers the earth, killing everyone and everything, the innocent with the guilty. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights. But the account also says the water covered the earth for 150 days. When the water recedes, the ark comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Then Noah sends out a series of birds. The first, a raven, doesn't return. The second, a dove, returns, as there is nowhere to land. The dove is released again, and this time returns with an olive branch, indicating that the waters have begun to recede. The dove is sent out once more and does not return. Finally, God simply tells Noah to go out of the ark and to be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Noah and the missus and the kids then set out to repopulate the world. Noah takes time to make a burnt offering of the animals and birds he has just saved from destruction. Pleased by Noah's thought, God says, "I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth. Nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done." As a sign of this covenant, or promise, God sets a bow in the sky, presumably a folkloric explanation for rainbows after a rain. As a part of this new covenant or agreement, God blesses Noah, gives him a new set of dietary laws. Meat is now in, the vegetarianism specified earlier in Genesis is out, and institutes a new sanction against murder because man has been made in God's image. The Noah story serves as a symbolic second creation tale. God realizes his flaws and starts over. It is not exactly a comforting picture of God. This God of the flood seems rather impatient, unforgiving, and testy. Apart from Noah, who is described as righteous, and his family, there is apparently no one else in all of creation worth saving. The innocent, including the animals of the world, are caught up with the guilty.
Was Noah the first drunk?
Things are not perfect in the new creation after Noah and the kids settle down, especially when the fruit of the vine makes its first biblical appearance. Noah becomes the first man to plant a vineyard, invents wine, and then discovers getting drunk. While Noah is lying in his tent, naked and drunk, his son Ham accidentally walks in and sees Dad in this state. He tells his brothers Shem and Japheth what he saw, and they discreetly cover their father without looking at him. When Noah discovers that Ham has seen him in his birthday suit, he isn't too happy. Without explaining why this is such a bad thing, Noah curses his son. But there is some confusion here because Noah places the curse on Canaan, Ham's son, rather than on the actual culprit, Ham. He says, "Cursed be Canaan, lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers." He also says, "Blessed by the Lord my God be Shem, and let Canaan be his slave." This confusion had long-lasting and ghastly implications. The point of this story would have been quite clear for the ancient Israelites. They were meant to rule over Canaan's descendants, the people who lived in the Promised Land. The Canaanites had a reputation for fairly lascivious sexual practices that were highly offensive in the eyes of the Israelites. Seeing one's father naked, and in some interpretations a homosexual act by Ham has been suggested, was associated with the lewd Canaanite sexual practices. In Leviticus, the phrase, "to uncover nakedness," is a euphemism for sexual relations. But the real historical impact of this passage was the later interpretation widely given to this story in 17th and 18th century America. Looking for moral justification for slavery, American slaveholders argued, incorrectly, that Ham was the ancestor of the so-called southern tribes that included Africa, As the children of Ham, Africans were therefore meant to be slaves, a point of view that can only be charitably called way off base. Still, it was a widely accepted interpretation in England and America until well into the 1800s, when some Christian groups began to condemn slavery as a grave sin. Numerous other biblical verses were also cited in defense of slavery, although overlooked were some of the other Israelite laws regarding slavery, including invocations to free runaway slaves. The other sons of Noah received great blessings, and the line beginning with Noah's son Shem eventually leads to the patriarch Abraham. The name Shem is the source of the word Semite, which applies to all the groups who were descended from Shem, Jew and Arab alike. Born in a direct line from Noah, Abram, the son of Torah, was also directly descended from Adam. The founding patriarch of Jew and Arabs alike, Abram, whose name will later be changed to Abraham, had a brother named Haran. Haran died, but had a son named Lot, who was Abram's nephew. Abram's wife was Sarai, who was also his half-sister. Terah took his son Abram, Sarai, and Lot to Haran. A little confusion here, because the place name is the same name of Abram's dead brother. Haran is the name of a city in Mesopotamia, in what is now modern Syria. While in Haran, Abram is instructed by God to go to nearby Canaan, a land that God promises to Abram and his descendants. In Canaan, Abram sets up 2 altars and invokes the name of the Lord. When a famine strikes, Abram goes to Egypt, where he is afraid that the Pharaoh will kill him in order to take his wife, Sarai, because she is so beautiful. To save his own life, Abram tells Sarai to pretend she is his sister. Sarai is taken into the Pharaoh's household as a concubine, and Abram prospers. But God sends a plague on the Pharaoh's house, and when the Pharaoh discovers Abram's deceit, he orders Abram to leave Egypt. Once back in Canaan, Abram and Lot decide to split up. Abram offers Lot the first choice of land, and Abram's nephew picks out a plain near the city of Sodom. Abram goes to the hill country of Canaan, where he is once more told by God, "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted." Promised repeatedly that he will found a great nation, Abram is getting worried, and not any younger. When he considers making one of his household slaves his heir, his wife Sarai suggests he take her Egyptian slave, Hagar, as a concubine. Any child she bore would still be considered Sarai's. Clay tablets found in the Near East confirm that this would have been a completely acceptable idea in that time. But the story takes on a wonderful human quality when the barren Sarai becomes jealous of the pregnant Hagar and mistreats her. Hagar runs away into the wilderness, where God promises that her unborn child will also have many offspring. And she returns to Abram to bear his first son, Ishmael, which means God hears. Arabs trace their origin to the Ishmaelites, the Bedouin tribes of the southern wilderness. This is the ancient connection between Arab and Jew through Abraham. But God promises yet another son to the incredulous Abram, now 99 years old, and Sarai, who is 90. God tells Abram that he will now be called Abraham, which means ancestor of a multitude. God promises him all the land of Canaan, and asks him to keep the deal by circumcising every male in his tribe. Abraham agrees, and all the adult males, including 13-year-old Ishmael, are circumcised. The ritualistic removal of the male foreskin is not peculiar to the descendants of Abraham. It was practiced by many African, South American, and Middle Eastern people, including the Egyptians. Sarai laughs at the seemingly ridiculous notion that she will bear a son at her age. God also changes her name to Sarah. Later, Sarah gives birth to Isaac, a name that means he laughs. Isaac will become Abraham's heir. Hagar is once more forced to flee because of Sarah's jealousy, and again the promise is made that Ishmael will found a nation. Left in the wilderness without water, Hagar begs not to see her son die. An angel, an English word derived from the Greek word for messenger, appears to Hagar, and a well miraculously begins to flow. In that biblical hotspot, Sodom, where Abraham's nephew Lot has chosen to settle, once again people have turned very bad. God looks down and doesn't like the scene. Evil is everywhere, especially in the form of unspecified sexual depravity, which is why certain sexual crimes are still gathered together under the catch-all term sodomy. Once again, God decides to do away with at least some of his most troublesome creations. Remember, God promised Noah that he would never again destroy everyone. But before God wipes anybody out, Abraham strikes a bargain with the Lord, persuasively arguing that God should not destroy the innocent with the guilty. Abraham haggles with God, negotiating down from 50 righteous men to 45, then 40, then 30, then 20. God finally agrees that for the sake of 10 righteous men, the town won't be destroyed. Apparently, 10 aren't to be found. 2 angels in human form, sent to warn Abraham's nephew Lot of Sodom's impending doom, are welcomed into Lot's home, fed, and offered beds for the night in the best tradition of ancient hospitality. But a lusty and unruly crowd of Sodom's men demands that Lot turn over these strangers so that they might know them. Clearly, the crowd is not the welcome wagon. Faced with turning his guests over to a certain homosexual gang rape, Lot refuses, even going so far as to offer his 2 virgin daughters to the frenzied mob. He views his obligation as host as greater than his role as father. The crowd angrily presses in on him, and Lot is pulled back into his house. The angels tell Lot to take his family away. Sodom is about to be leveled. Lot's future sons-in-law don't believe them and refuse to leave. Even Lot is slow to take the hint, so the angels lead him, his wife, and their 2 daughters out of the city. Sodom and nearby Gomorrah, whose specific evils are curiously never spelled out, are destroyed. On the way out of town, Lot's wife ignores the warning not to look back. As fire and brimstone rain down on the wicked twin cities, she is turned into a pillar of salt. The account of Lot's wife is another version of a common mythic theme. Someone is punished for looking back against divine or heavenly instructions. In the Greek myths, for instance, Orpheus goes to the underworld to recover his beloved wife, Eurydice. As they leave the underworld, he ignores the instruction not to look back, and Eurydice is lost to him forever. In the case of Lot's wife, the ancient tale has been cited to explain the peculiar salt formations that surround the Dead Sea. Having waited until he was 100 years old for the son and heir who would fulfill God's promise, Abraham is told by God to take the boy and offer him as a burnt sacrifice. Abraham never questions this directive in the Scriptures. He simply does as he is told, offering blind obedience to a God who would make him kill his beloved child. Even when the boy asks his father where the sacrificial lamb is, Abraham answers only, God himself will provide the lamb. Only as Abraham binds the boy, lays him on the altar, and holds the knife over him, does an angel stop him. Abraham is told that he has passed the test. He fears God. A ram is substituted for the young boy on the altar.
Would Abraham really have done it?
The story of Abraham sacrificing Isaac is a central moment in the Bible, but it raises a number of disturbing questions. Is that kind of devotion or obedience to a divine call acceptable? Would Abraham actually have gone through with it? And what kind of God would ask a parent to do this, even as a test? To many people, it has always seemed an unnecessarily cruel test of faith. There is nothing that Abraham does in the story to suggest that he had any second thoughts about this divine request. He doesn't make the same kinds of arguments for his own son that he made for the citizens of Sodom, complete strangers. Sarah is also silent in this episode. Did she try to stop her husband? Did she know what he was up to? All interesting questions, but they lie in the realm of speculation. Of course, whether this event actually happened is also purely speculation, just like the very existence of Abraham as a real person rather than a mythic character. Maybe this episode was another legend designed to demonstrate what unshakable faith means, and that God had done well in selecting Abraham to be the founder of the chosen people. But there's another angle to this story, not usually discussed in Sunday school. In some cults and religions of the ancient Near East, human sacrifice was still practiced at that time. In fact, Hebrew law even states that the firstborn offspring of humans and animals were to be offered to God. The aborted sacrifice of Isaac has been interpreted as a symbolic moment in which human sacrifice was rejected by God. Unfortunately, the practice didn't stop with Abraham. As the later history of ancient Israel shows, human sacrifice continued in Jerusalem for centuries. After Abraham's wife Sarah dies at age 127, he buries her in a cave in Hebron. Significantly, he purchases the burial land from the local people, the Hittites. And the verses elaborately explain the great measures Abraham took to stake a legal claim to this land. This is a crucial passage, one of the oldest recorded real estate deals, which is viewed as a legal confirmation of possession of land that had already been divinely promised. In other words, God's word is one thing, but a deed is better in court. Abraham also realizes that his son Isaac should have a wife, but does not want a woman of Canaan. One more dig at the Canaanites by the Genesis author. In one of the longest narratives in Genesis, Abraham sends a servant back to his homeland. At Nahor, near Haran, the servant encounters a beautiful girl at a well. Again, there is a confusion of place and personal names. Nahor is the name of a town, but it is also the name of another of Abraham's brothers. The girl draws water for him, and Abraham's servant treats this as a sign from God that this is the girl for Isaac. She is Rebekah, the daughter of Abraham's nephew, Bethuel. Abraham's servant is welcomed into the house by Rebekah's older brother, Laban, and in an elaborate negotiation, the two strike a deal for Rebekah to become Isaac's wife. After Sarah's death, old Abraham decides he's not done sowing oats yet either. He takes another wife, Keturah, who has 6 more of Abraham's children. These are the ancestors of other Arabic tribes, including the Midianites, who later figure in the story of Moses. When Abraham finally dies at age 175, he is buried alongside Sarah in the cave on the site he had purchased at Hebron. Another genealogy follows Abraham's death and traced the children of Ishmael, who also had 12 sons who were later organized into 12 tribes. Like Abraham, Isaac is promised the land and many descendants. He is like Abraham in another respect too. Once again there is a famine, and God tells Isaac to go to the land of King Abimelech, with whom Abraham had an earlier dispute. In a tale that mirrors Abraham's lie about his wife, Sarah, to the Pharaoh, Isaac tells the local people that Rebekah is his sister, because he too fears he might be killed because Rebekah is so desirable. When King Abimelech sees Isaac fondling Rebekah in a field, he says, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Abimelech orders no one to bother Isaac, who goes on to prosper. King Abimelech is identified here, and in an earlier episode, as the king of the Philistines, the tribe that will play such a prominent part in the early history of Israel. This is another example of an apparent error in the chronology on the writer's part. The Philistines were part of the invasion of so-called Sea Peoples, and did not enter this area in large numbers until after 1200 BCE, long after these events would have taken place. Like Isaac's mother, the beautiful Rebekah is also barren, but she conceives and bears twin sons after Isaac prays to God. The firstborn is Esau. The second son, born gripping his older brother's heel, is Jacob. The common mythic theme of hostile twins is played out here as accounting for the two related tribes, the Israelites and the Edomites. Jacob, the younger, is a trickster, a classic mythic character, like Odysseus of Greek mythology. He becomes a shepherd and was favored by his mother. Esau is the hunter, slow-witted and easily deceived, but he is Isaac's favorite. Jacob first gets Esau to sell his birthright as the firstborn son for a pot of stew. In a more serious deceit, Jacob is prompted by his mother to trick his father Isaac, who is losing his sight. Rebekah cooks Isaac's favorite meal, then covers Jacob with a kid skin so that he will seem to be as hairy as Esau. Jacob tricks his father into giving him the deathbed blessing usually bestowed on the firstborn son. When Esau finds out what Jacob has done, he pointedly asks his father for another blessing. Isaac tells Esau that he will live away from the fat of the land and shall live by the sword. His father also says Esau will serve his brother, but that one day he will break free. After receiving this mixed blessing, Esau still threatens to kill Jacob.
What is Jacob's ladder?
Fearful that Esau may still try to kill Jacob, Rebekah schemes to have her younger son sent somewhere out of harm's way. In a story that mirrors the search for Isaac's bride, Jacob also sets off for Haran to find a wife. The narrative follows Jacob on a long journey, like that of the Odyssey, although not quite as perilous. It is still another ancient poetic tradition, the hero's wandering search, filled with mystical happenings and extraordinary events, and his eventual return home. On the first night of his journey, Jacob uses a stone for a pillow and dreams of a ladder reaching up to heaven. On it, angels are going up and down. God then speaks to Jacob, renewing the promise of land and descendants made to Abraham and Isaac. When Jacob wakes, he takes the stone he had used for a pillow and pours oil on it to sanctify this place that he calls Bethel, or House of God, and promises that the Lord who spoke to him shall be his God. He also promises God, as Abraham had done, to tithe, or give 1/10 of all he receives. While artists of the Christian era usually depicted Jacob's ladder, immortalized in a widely sung hymn, as an actual ladder, the original word for ladder can also be translated as ramp or stairway. Long before Led Zeppelin, in other words, the Bible was doing Stairway to Heaven. Abraham's son Jacob wants a girl just like the girl that dear old dad got. So he too goes to Laban, Rebekah's brother, as Abraham's servant did. And he also meets a beautiful girl at the well. Unlike Abraham's servant, who carried a lavish treasure as a bride price, Jacob is broke. He promises to work for Uncle Laban for 7 years to pay for Rachel. The plot thickens through a series of tricks played by each of the actors in this drama, which must have been popular as it was told around the campfires over the ages. On the morning of the wedding, Laban has his older daughter, Leah, dressed as the bride, veiled to conceal her identity, and she marries Jacob. After discovering this ruse, Jacob insists that he still wants Rachel, and promises to serve Laban for another 7 years if he can have her too. Laban agrees, and now Jacob has 2 wives and another 7-year hitch to serve. But he manages to keep busy in that time, siring a flock of children, even though his beloved Rachel is barren. First, Leah produces 4 sons. The envious Rachel gives her slave, Bilhah, to Jacob, and Bilhah has 2 sons. Leah, who had stopped at 4, wants more sons. So she gives Jacob her maid, Zilpah. She too produces 2 sons. Leah isn't finished after all, and has another 2 sons and a daughter. Finally, Rachel's infertility is cured and she has 2 sons, although she dies in childbirth with her second son. Before very long, Jacob has a baker's dozen of children.
How did Jacob become Israel?
Jacob, the trickster, gets his own revenge on Uncle Laban when they make a business deal regarding the herds that Jacob has been tending so successfully. Jacob and Laban agree that Jacob can keep all the spotted and speckled sheep and goats and all the black goats in the flocks. But in the night, the crafty Laban tells his sons to remove all the striped male goats, the speckled female goats, and the black lambs from the herds. Jacob has a few tricks of his own, though, and in a story that combines magic with some early genetic engineering, Jacob places striped sticks in front of the healthiest and strongest animals of the flock in breeding time. When the newborns arrive, the magical sticks have produced many striped, spotted, and speckled young. Jacob continues this process until he has successfully bred a strong herd of livestock that will be his, getting the better of his deceitful uncle. Laban and his sons aren't happy about Jacob's ruse, and God sends an angel to Jacob, warning him to leave Laban's house. After 20 years of service to his uncle, Jacob sets off with his wives, children, and flocks, without telling Laban. Before leaving, Rachel steals her father's household gods, the small wooden or stone carved idols people kept around the house for good luck. Laban catches up to Jacob and his caravan and begins to search for anything Jacob might have stolen. Rachel sits on her father's gods, and when they come to search her, she tells them she is menstruating and can't get up. The household gods were idols typical of the cults worshipped in Canaan and elsewhere in Mesopotamia. Small carved statues or fertility symbols, they were typically placed throughout a home, just as people still hang pictures of saints or crosses. The episode in which the menstruating Rachel hides these idols would have been told by the Israelites with derisive mockery, as Rachel sat on the idols in her time of uncleanness.
Do you have a picture of His Majesty Rasta? Yes, I am, Jalil. And you have a picture of His Majesty Dread? Yes, I am, Giles Within I. And you have a picture of His Majesty Rassis? Yes, I am.
This is the Cutting Edge and IRFM coming through. You know, so over the years we focus on religious things, spiritual things on this program because we feel say that is one of the confusing issues in the minds of the Jamaican people for years, especially when it come on to them own faith, especially when it come on to the Christian faith in Jamaica. As the man say, most people have a Bible, most people don't read it. And our brother just called me a while ago and he might try to show me a thing and me ask him something else and he might say me I go around, you know. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous when we talk to certain people. This year me not gonna have no patience with certain reasons, you know. We are telling the truth. We don't have certain patience with certain reasons because them things that take up my time, more time. I take up my energy, you understand? But it was amazing about the Noah story because, you know, I always go back to this Noah story. And I hear Mr. Chisholm try explain where a logic still on a young program when they have the brethren in the name Fagan from up Blue Mountain there. I hear Mr. Chisholm try explain where the idea of the ark and the whole heap of animal them in it and, you know, clean out. They might try to show something in there, but isn't it amazing that before the ark, this God that them talk about in the Bible recommended a vegetarian diet for people. Then them come and watch the whole earth wash the whole earth and kill everything. And then now Noah, who is supposed to be a vegetarian, this is reasoning here, because if we go even further back, if you remember Cain and Abel, you know, and Cain was the one who planted the ground, and Abel the one who was the hunter, the cattle, the one who deal with livestock then, and Cain was the one who deal with ground provision. But God accepted the sacrifice of the animals over the one who was planting the ground provisions. Now, isn't it amazing in this story that it's supposed to be history, which we still not accept as history upon this program here, that Noah in this ark, who is a vegetarian with all his family, is vegetarian, and saving. I mean, this is so weird that Noah saved all of these animals in the ark for how much days, how much months him in the ark, save the animal them, and as him come out of the ark, him start kill off some of them for burn them as ark sacrifice to God. This is so amazing, man. You save the animal them from destruction, and as you come out of the ark, you start kill them off for offer them up as a sacrifice to God. And Genesis 8 till you say, and God loved the scent of this dead flesh. I go up to him. Not I say, look at the Bible and you see, God loved the scent of dead flesh going up to him. So, at one stage, the animals are saved in the ark, and then as Noah come out of the ark, so, him start to burn the flesh, burn the animal flesh them. And then now, this is where now, them say now, the old dietary law thing change now, where God are going to specify now, say, boy, man, you can't go and eat some animal, you know, because the earth stay away, you know, but it's a thing. Because Bridget called me a while ago, I me a while ago, but about ham. But the man never know him, I say, because something about some foolishness, I've just never read. And that is the same thing. Anytime a man going to argue over something, he must be able to understand that him have to have knowledge of something that him going to argue about. You can't call or argue with somebody with no knowledge of something. How can you be calling me and argue with me about something? Let me tell you, say, so what in the thing that the man is saying that is wrong? And he has say, well, you will go check it out. No, but you can't say wrong if you can't substantiate say the man wrong still. With saying when I say, him interpretation. You know, it's just like I. And that is the reason why I and a whole heap of these people always catch up. And that is why now I hear Mr. Ian Boy and I say, him Christian people, them do have no intelligence, them can't think, them don't reason. You see, and that is what disgusts him. And I can't say it disgusts him. I mean, I can't hear it disgusts him. That here some people who defend the same thing with him. And anytime him bring them on him program, and them attack to people who is opposing, not only the people them, but opposing even his view. Them can't stand up to no criticism and not serious, intelligent analysis of where them are defend. And the reason for that is because a whole heap of what them defending is either them don't have no knowledge of it, or what them defending cannot be substantiated by evidence and understanding of logical facts, reality. And that is what it is all about. That is why some people afraid for evil, just looking at the book and question something where we hear a while ago, or where the last time we played the second part of it. A whole lot of people afraid to question these things. Scared, very scared. So we come to that and we are saying, we hope say it will allow the students, the ones who want to think, to really think and analyze certain things. Over the years we were taught without question. And then I have a next problem too. I have a next problem with a man. I have a problem with Christians who are tell me say, because the thing in the Bible, you can't question it. And I have a problem with Rasta who are tell me say, because Haile Selassie say something, you can't analyze it. You have to just accept it. Watch a man, we have intelligence with human being. I have a serious problem with any Rasta who come tell me say, boy, Haile Selassie say that, you know, so what you say? You question it? Then wait there. Because I am Rasta. I mustn't be able to analyze logically, intelligently, what Haile Selassie says. And because I say Haile Selassie now, it's the same thing the Christian have upon the people them with the Bible. That them say God write the Bible, so you can't question it. And anybody who question the Bible, you know, this and this and this and that. It's the same thing. I see some Rasta bring off for me and now, and some Rasta bring off for one. That Haile Selassie say something. Him not analyzing what context did Haile Selassie say it, who he must say it to, and why him saying it at the time when he must say it. Because there's enough information now that is presented to I and I that wasn't in the time of a whole heap of the things that Haile Selassie say that need to be updated. So when a man come tell you now, say, boy, because he's a Rasta and Haile Selassie say that, there's no way now you can look into it. But just accept it. After me no puppet. And that is not downgrading or degrading the Rastafari idea and concept of Haile Selassie. It is just meaning that you are using your intelligence as a normal human being to evaluate what was said. And that goes for anyone. And I would not recommend any youth right now. Because a whole heap of youth right now as a Rasta. And a whole heap of elders tell them certain things. And them afraid them can't come out of the grip of that elder talk. Because him look on the elder as a person who knows certain things. And when the elder quote certain things and tell us, boy, I listen to fly upon lightning bolts and all these things. Him can't go in and head cup and say, boy, right, them a question him say, boy, right now, the man is dead a long time, and I'm not going to question that. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I will not bow to that understanding of Rastafari, and I will not recommend any youth and starting out with my daughter them. And I hope them not bring, well, my daughter them now bring up for them people. I hope them don't, I starting out with my daughter them to say, look, man, don't make no man come tell you, say, there's nothing in earth that you cannot question. There's certain things in earth that you can't question. Everything can be questioned, no matter who or what it come from. If you don't understand something, you have to question it. If it is said, and you don't see through what it is said, and you have another reasoning and understanding about what is said, you need to present that understanding and that reasoning, no matter who say it, no matter what say it. So no guy, no come round the corner now, to come catch me at the same thing where me I run from. When a man tell me about, say, boy, if I'm reading the Bible, I saw. When we come understand now, say, there's a lot of things that is said in the Bible that need to be questioned. And it need to be understood a different way too. Not only question, but it need to be understood a different way. We have to understand from which part, from whence cometh the reasoning. Why was it said? When was it said? What was happening in the period of time when it was said? And who said it? Very important, who said it. So we can't run from one slave mentality and come to the next slave mentality boy right now. Haile Selassie said this. Therefore what? So if Haile Selassie said the thing now, what that means? It means that I cannot look into it. Watch a man. If my father says something to me and I don't understand it, Rasta, me will question it. And me will show him points and understanding about the thing. Because right now, there's a lot of things that young people know right now. In how much year old them is. You have 20-year-old youth. When know things right now where your grandmother at 100-year-old, in her fear 100 years, she'll never know that. And you have youth right now. When I talk about experience, we talk about knowings. We're not talking about what you experience, because obviously an elder person has experienced more than a 20-year-old. A 100-year-old person can talk about and relate his experience much more articulately than a 20-year-old that don't even go half at 100. But in terms of knowledge, because knowledge don't have to come with experience. Knowledge don't have to come with experience of nothing. Knowledge is where you acquire through information. And we are saying, there's so much information that is around the place right now. That a person can be 100-year-old and a person can be 20-year-old. And that 20-year-old know more than that 100-year-old person because of the information that is flying left and right in these times. This is the age of information. This is the age of science and technology, where technology advance, the perception and the knowledge of things gone and things that is here now. So we don't want to get no religion with no Rasta, no Christian. We that are religious mindset people. And especially upon this program. Me do into the religion thing. That a man come tell me, say, boy, right now, this is in the Bible. Therefore. Haile Selassie said this. Therefore. What the hell is going on here? Or we jump from one thing to the next thing and I go on like say we're free and liberated. It is about the liberation of the spirit, liberation of the heart, liberation of the conscience and the consciousness. It is not about this said that more said that, no, without questioning anything. The Bible tells us, boy, right now, Joshua command his son to sit still. No question that because I say, boy, right now, God can do anything. So, if Joshua command, I reason with the Ethiopian dad, I say it already upon his program. I did a New York one night and I sit down and I read the Ethiopian data. And I said, tell me, sister, you really believe, said the sun was moving around the earth? She said, well, if the Bible says it was moving, it was moving. So when the Bible said Joshua commanded the sun to stand still, it is implying that the sun was moving. And if it implies the sun that was moving, it is saying that Joshua has the authority and the power through God to make the sun stop. Now Galileo, who scientifically proved that it is the earth that revolves around the sun, was damned because he said this, because the Pope at the time said that it is in the Bible that the sun move and not the earth. So when Galileo come with this devil thing, well, see there now, we understand different because of more information that is presented. So this little Ethiopian data tell me now, in all our intelligence, in all our, what she tell me about Los Angeles and she's in the acting this and that and all these things and her father is this and her this is that and she's related to Haile Selassie. In all of what she tell me now, she say, and this is what she say end up with, she say, look here, in those days, if the Bible in those days say, God, Joshua commanded his son to stand still through the power of God. Therefore, in those days, it was moving. That is fair conclusion. No. How can I be a well-thinking person who can deduct consciously what is happening and come to a conclusion like that? Because it is in the Bible. And most Jamaican people, most black people get caught with that thinking. So when the Bible tells us, boy, right now, Adam and Eve, snake attack, you know, the snake, I want to know what the snake did. The snake used to upright, but when God cursed the snake, now the snake start crawl upon the belly. You know, all these stories. A man feed 5,000 people with how much barley loaf and 3 fish and all these things. And people say, it must be that because it's in the Bible. So them tell you about this God named Yahweh, Eldonai, Elohim, all of these names that them give, these titles of some entity that is outside of themselves. And then come and say the entity inside. One time them tell you the entity outside, or they tell you, because they realize it's madness, they tell you, no, it's inside of you. And then you have to accept the inside. Look here, man. Look here, man. We have to face this reality. It's just a pity that sometimes, like for even them tape, you know, we have play like Jamaican people have this thing where, like when I talk to them now, it's like a madman that, you know, Mutabaruka, a mad boy. We say a white man come and tell him the same thing, it have more validity. What a judgment. What a judgment. That I can't sit down and tell you the same thing where a white man I tell you. But because the white man come in a coat and tie and suit, film argument more legitimate and my own more outrageous. Because he's a Rasta man who walk barefoot and flash blacks and attack certain language and certain way. It just sounds stupid. But the same man come in a coat and tie. It's the same thing I go on in Jamaica. The same thing I go on in Jamaica. I wanted to see a man dirty and tattered on the road. I run across the next part of the road. A man come with a coat and tie, you know, I run from him. And the same coat and tie man going at the bank, go write a bounce check and fraudulently get money out of the bank and rob poor people because I'm having a coat and tie. So we lose that thinking. Because now we play this and we are say, whole heap of youth right now sit down and analyze it. So the last time we do this, whole heap of youth sit down and analyze it. Whole heap of ones come on me yard and, CD, them want CD, them go to them college and where and all these things. So it's not an exercise of, just playing it. It's an exercise of increasing your knowledge base so that you will be best able to become either a better person in what you believe in, or you analyze and realize that what you believe in has no substantial basis of truth or reality, and it's just through faith why you believe this thing. And that's all the Bible is about. The Bible is about faith. The Bible has nothing to do with if there's a tree in the garden of, because them name certain place that is geographically accurate, because them name certain name that we know say, well, maybe it exists, we now declare that this thing is true. But look at all that story like Superman. Look at all Batman and Gotham City in New York. No way, Batman don't live in New York, Rasta, but them use geographical areas that people is familiar with to present a fictional person. And nobody believes that there's a Batman in New York and there's a Superman flying all over the place. And that is what the whole heap of the Bible is. The whole heap of the Bible is like a Superman, Batman story, where this great Superman just come and save the world all the while when the world is in a problem. And yet still look there now, see his problem. I was watching the television weekend, and I don't know much of the one them know about this story about them. Some miners did in a mine in I think at Georgia or somewhere. Them a mine coal. And I am watching this thing on the TV, and it's there, so I know, because I lay down. And to be honest with you, I lay down at the hotel the whole day and meditate on the whole thing that I see on the TV. And I go, and for those of you who never hear this news, some miners go down in that thing, and couple days them down there, nobody don't know how them can come out. So them are going to send some people down there now to find the miners. All right. The people them in the town, which is a very small town, most of the people them in there is really survived. This happened in America just last week. The people them survive after mining, it's a nice town. The people them go to church, they behave nice, and them is Christian mining and thing. So the people them gather in the church. Hundreds of people gather in the church. A whole heap of cameraman go down there. Them gather in the church to pray for them loved ones, because them underneath there, and them a pray say them down dead, and everybody a pray for a miracle. Like even the mayor, even the senator get up and say, boy, right now, it's only a miracle can save these people. It's only a miracle can save these people. These 12 miners are 13 of them in the mine. Because when them look now, them say carbon monoxide and all these things in the air, and the amount of that carbon in the air is too much for any life, support any life down there. And them down there so long without any air, oxygen have gone and all that thing there. So the people in the church are pray. The people them on the TV on CNN are pray. And they bring all these experts to tell you now, say this and this and that and that. All right. Bam. A news come. One man dead. One of the miners them dead. I want the people them listen to this story, I know. Because people go and twist around and turn around stories all the while to suit them own faith and them own thinking. The people them a pray to help the ones them under there. Through faith, them hope say, God go and listen to the prayers and save the miners. One of the miner them dead. According to where the news come out, say one dead. The woman who is the wife of the miner who dead, start to cry. But she still a prayer and I say, well, why no, she don't know so it go. All right. News come out now, say the 12 miner them alive. Rest no. It's like Mardi Gras in the town, man. When them hear say the 12 miners them alive, it's like the people them that if you ever see them on the TV in a Rasta, it's like them prayer answered. Them prayer answered. God work a miracle. For how much days now the miner them inside of that mine in that cave there. And 12 of them alive. Rasta no. No man come on the TV. We want to, this is breaking news. We have just learned that the 12 miners are alive. And the man on the TV I said, wow. And you know the mayor said that this was a miracle. And it seemed that if this is really a miracle. And the people them in the town, hundreds of people start to glad and laugh and jubilation and things. Rasta no, 3 hours after, on the same television, the same news, 3 hours after the news say the 12 miners them dead, them wasn't alive. No, can you imagine? 3 hours before, the whole town, as a matter of fact, the whole America was in jubilance that these 12 miners was alive. 3 hours after, the news say the 12 miners is dead and 1 miner saved. One of the miner them get saved. Now, going back to this thing I know. Tell me, people of Jamaica who's listening to me right now, the persons who was praying to God to save the miners, when they heard that the miners was alive, they started to say that God work. This mystery of God is unraveled, that God a work, man. God saved the miners, and the wife them and the children them of the miners was so, it's like them faith in a God was so emphatically declared and proven that why them never did a prayer, man, the miners them wouldn't be saved. It's because of them prayer why the miners get saved, man. 3 hours after, the same people them who was in jubilance and happiness and clapping, 3 hours after, them find out say, the people them who, them in a them mind, in a them faith, believe say God did save. In a them mind, the miners them dead. In a the reality, the miners them dead. In a them faith, the miners them live. In a them reality, the miners them dead. Can somebody explain to me? Oh, is that faith? 3 hours. 3 hours it take that faith to get shattered by reality. 3 hours it take. Because we are watching TV the whole time, right through the day. 3 hours it take for a faith that pronounce life get shattered by the pronunciation of death in reality. Where is the God that these people was praying to in the reality? Because they wasn't praying to God in no reality. They was praying to God in the faith. But the reality shows something different. The reality shows say what? The miners them dead and a 1 miner save. Right now I struggle for him live. Them say I get better. This is the Cutting Edge on IRFM, yes.
Muta Baruka?
Yes, blessed.
Yes, my beloved. This is Abba Zero.
Brethren, give thanks for the weekend, man.
Yes, my beloved. Let me ask you something. How come you're still on the air?
A 1:45 now, man. I'm not 2 yet.
Okay.
You're in a 3 hour difference, you know. You're in a 3 hour difference.
But you are still on the air.
Yeah, but I'm not 2 yet. At 2 o'clock, I come and have.
So how you talking on the air, but you're still talking to me?
Because you listen to the radio, man. Stop listening to the radio.
Oh.
You listen to two things, man. At the ear, you're on the radio, you know.
I am on the air right now?
Yeah, man. You're on the radio, man.
Oh, most beloved, kind and great. Wow.
You're on the ear, and that's why I'm telling you, give thanks for the weekend. Go on and I said,
what a weekend, my beloved.
Yeah, man, it's sweet, man. Sweet.
What a joy. I just want to send out an energy motor because it's so significant right now that we should have made that move over the weekend.
Yeah.
And to experience that experience of the Virgin Island with the same gift that Jamaica gave to the Virgin
Islands. Reggae music.
You know?
Yeah, man. And the message of Rastafari.
Reggae energy and this Rastafari energy field that has anointed these youth, these men and women.
Yes.
From such a distance.
Yes.
Just seeing a certain space of clarity holiness within the air. We just want to say, give thanks for your spirit for coming, and for even the space of anointing these Rasta man and woman within the new faculty.
Yes, yes.
In particular, knowing that Von Benjamin is such an influential voice in the VI.
Yes.
The lead singer of
Midnight,
the group, to go on stage and express Ethiopia, Haile Selassie I, before David, before Solomon.
yes.
That was just such a power motor to know that a Rastafari in his youthful spirit can be so open.
Yes, to the
to
reasoning.
this new faculty.
To the reasoning, yeah, man.
To the reasoning that is so necessary.
And you know what good about that too? Him never ever wait till we're gone and leave the island. He said right up front there when we're still there.
Away motor.
Yes, yes.
And within that spirit motor, I just say right now it's time for our people, near and far, to look within themselves, question the best of themselves, and don't hide from the truth, because you know what? At times we live in denial
Yes.
of even things that we doubt.
Yes.
You know, so, Muta, within the space of talking to you now, I'm in a joy and an appreciation loving
Yes.
of just the goodness of the work that you express on a day-to-day basis. You remember, like the beloved Von Benjamin expressed, Muta Baruka, you're an institution that needs walls around you in the nature of protection. We just send out love unto your spirit and unto all our brothers and sisters.
And I want to say I get the brags. I get the brags there.
Oh, you got the praise. Give thanks for the spirit of
Yeah,
that
man, the
song,
brethren
my
come
beloved.
through with them. Yeah, man, give thanks.
Give thanks, give thanks.
So you know, the reason a while ago?
I heard everything, Muta.
Ah, beautiful.
And it's such a space of just saying to you, questions are so important now. Because if you don't ask questions, Muta, sometimes you will forever live in the illusion of what you accept.
And what was running
And
from?
not everything we accept, Muta, is real.
Yes, yes.
There's so much stuff in the illusion of conditionings that we have accepted for so long that binds us perpetually in the same repetitive state of the illusion.
Yes.
You know, Muta, it's like this, my beloved. Here and now, Rastafari is arising. It's a rising by which each and every one, if they can catch themselves in the space of this knowing, the earth, what we say salvation, is right before us.
Yes.
So, beloved, just to say now, we ask the youths of Jamaica, in particular the young youths who have the guns and who sending out the bullets and creating more death upon death upon death. We're asking these youths to stop, question themselves, and see the futility of the pain that they're perpetuating in such a small island. Just today, someone expressed to me, Abba Zero, how could the island be so small and be the #1 death spot on the planet?
That we ask a question every day. We ask a question every day. An island that was so like a light and a beacon of hope for the world has now
For the
become the
planet.
dead trap of the world. You know?
Muta, to see that this island still have what is called reggae music in consciousness, Nyabingi in consciousness, Rastafari in consciousness, and with all that energy, for we to still experience the death on a daily basis,
Yes.
we have to ask ourselves, where does it end?
Yeah.
And I am not putting out any energy to say Rastafari is responsible or reggae music is responsible, but for an island to have so much consciousness, Mutabaruka, it's for the youths to just question, where are they going with the death? And what does it take? And I see deeply, Muta, that the politicians of Jamaica, they're perpetuating a syndrome of corruption by which the youth themselves are living leaving out a legacy
Yes.
of the evilness of the politicians
That them plant.
that they've planted.
Them plant it and I run from it like say them never did have nothing to do with it.
Muta.
Terrible.
So, you know, when we got to Puerto Rico, there's a Rasta man from Ghana
Yeah.
that
Quasi.
housed us.
Quasi, yes.
Quasi.
When we reach there, them tell me say I just left there.
Yes, beloved.
Him come for me at the airport. Him come for me at the airport and him say, oh, you know, your brethren them just leave them. I say, wow, me think say them gone a for a long time.
Beloved, he played us a video by the name of One Love.
Oh yeah, the movie there, yes.
That movie, Muta Baruka, I would recommend each and every family, wherever they are, to get that movie and to look deep within that movie, because there's a message there that the pastors...
It's showing at Jamaica, you know. It show at Jamaica, you know.
Oh, brother.
It's showing at the theater them at
movie
Jamaica.
like that to be shown in Jamaica, and we still have this energy of violence this way, Muta, beloved. I cannot be hopeless. I have to keep this hope alive. But
Of course.
I say to you, this movie has transformed and answered so much questions just within my being. And if we could just put it out to say, let's return again to this spirit of this knowing of what is called redemption.
Yes.
It's a redemption spirit, you know, Muta, by which if we just catch this faith, and it's in every one of us.
Yes.
It's not a redemption that you're going to find from a gospel. It's a knowingness within ourselves that we're going to find this space to say, look, man, truth stands, righteousness stands.
All while.
And it's forever.
Yeah, man.
Muta, Rastafari is one perfect love.
Blessed my Lord.
Rastafari transcends all the dogmas and all the illusions.
All the religion and all the God.
And all the religions and the confusion.
Give thanks, brethren.
Rastafari live forever.
Isis. Yeah, Abba Zeros calling from San Francisco. I shouldn't say San Francisco. Oakland, California.